Can everyone hear me? Yeah? All right. Well, we don't have Doc, but that's okay. When he comes in, can we all go, "What's up, Doc?" If I had a carrot. All right, so I'm Brittany. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you for Kwaai for bringing us all together to talk about personal AI. Because it's personal and it applies to everyone, even if you're not in the tech industry. So it's important to talk about this and at a high level where everyone can sort of find their own incentive. So thank you, and thank you, Matt, for doing intros earlier. I appreciate that. And thank you, Richard, for being here and sort of saving the day last minute. We have about 25.
And she didn't at that time. And everybody texted in Europe, but they weren't doing it in the US yet. And so I gave her this Nokia candy bar phone, which if you twisted it sideways had a keyboard in it. And she texted me one word. It was no. Okay. But she took one, when she was visiting a lawyer doing something in Santa Barbara where we lived at the time, and she saw an iPhone, the very first iPhone. And she said, "I can work with that." And she got one. And she's still teaching me how to use an iPhone. Okay, so it's a matter of there's the invention, and now I need it. We don't have that yet. I think if what we saw outlined earlier from our guys here, when that turns into a product anybody can hold in their hand and say, "I got to use it," then we'll have it, right? But now we don't. I'll tell you the personal AI I use right now are just they're the cloud services. They're Perplexity.ai, iAsk.ai. Perplexity is amazing, and it gives you sources, which is handy. And even it still screws up the sources sometimes. It'll give you a date that isn't real, stuff like that. I liked one of the earlier presenters was showing a piece of like the screen of something, and it had the made up names in it. Like, I don't know if dall-e is programmed to spell everything wrong or not, but they don't have knowledge. They don't understand. There's not understanding. There's pattern matching, but it's not really intelligence. Intelligence is a human quality. It's not a quantity. IQ is a horrible term. My mother taught in the same school system I was in, and my IQ as a kid had an 80-point range. Okay, and by the time I was in the 8th grade, they put me in a slow group, so I go to learn a trade because I sucked at school. But anyway, the thing I probably use most is art. And here's an interesting thing. Have you noticed that AI art already looks like shit? I mean, you can spot it every time. And everybody's using it as a kind of a cheat code. Wow, I could do, here's a farm, here's something else, here's an old car. And they all kind of look the same, no matter how much you teach them to make it look original. They don't. It's kind of weird. And I don't think until we get personal AI like we're trying to create here, that we're going to have a breakthrough. So
all right,
that's fine.
So art. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, short answer is one word.
Oh, yeah. Boiled it down.
First of all, it's great to be here. Great to see everybody here today. Yeah, a lot of the cloud-based ones are interesting. The art one, I think everybody's seen the example of the old man and the unicorn, right? Have y'all seen that one? There's an old man hugging a unicorn and the unicorn is sticking through his chest. So they got that one off a little bit. So I'll go a little different direction. So from the cloud-based, and some of them are very interesting. Perplexity is pretty cool. I'll go to a small language model, a personal language model approach. There's a company called, a small startup called personal.ai. And this is a model that trains on you. So you have total control over what you're putting into the model. Any kind of content that you have, things you've written in particular, it does very well with the written word. And for like small-time professionals, someone like me who actually do a lot of writing, having all that in one place and then be able to query it and have it massage that, work with it, give you some ideas based on your own context. It links into LLMs when you want it to, but otherwise it really is your own personal AI. Obviously, we're at the early stages of what this could look like, but to me, that's a really cool model, an example of, I'm hoping, where a lot of what we're doing here today will end up.
Cool. So my viewpoint in this is we are still in the AI hype cycle. So first question is what product? It disappeared yesterday. It's something new today. So the real thing that I experienced as I travel last 14 months is that it's helping you ideate a lot of things and makes things faster. So in that sense, I think a couple of things that have stabilized over time, again, they have their differences. You would have noticed too, if you use Anthropic versus ChatGPT. One is more flamboyant, more personal, because guess what? By default, they're taking your data and training it, and Anthropic is not. So those are a couple of tools I use for data that I would personally otherwise put out as a public material. For things that I want to use, there's a great pool of open source material out there. Every one of those products that is available for sale or for a price, you have open source communities giving it to you. So, and the coolest part is all you need is a gaming computer to run all of these. So I would encourage anyone, and including myself, I've been doing nonstop. Every new project that hits, run it locally, try to see what it can do. So that's my approach towards this.
I'll give two examples. How many of you have the Samsung S24 with Galaxy AI?
Wow.
It does real-time language translation. So I call Bill. I speak Hindi. Bill speaks English. If both of us have the same phone, I'll speak in Hindi. He'll hear in English. And you know, English back to Hindi, right? It automatically detects, does it as close to real time as possible. That's personalized AI, right? Second example I would use is my Tesla with autonomous. It's edge AI, inference is happening at the edge in my car. It's personalized to how I'm driving, where I'm driving, you know, what kind of traffic there is, what kind of traffic lights there are. Just imagine if the car did actions based on some average from the cloud. it won't work, right? So I know autonomous is not ubiquitous, but I have an early beta version. And once you take advantage of it, you say you have seen the future. It is very cool. So those are two good examples.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate that. So I want to, Balaji, I have a question for you. If so, it sounds like it's in the use case, not so much the tools, where the difference between business and personal comes in. And I'm curious, do you think it matters who builds those tools, and what the difference between them are going to be, or the concerns from a corporate created personal AI versus an open community like Kwaai?
Absolutely. I think it matters who builds it, because what's the motivation, right? Corporate motivation is not same as your personal motivation. So it absolutely matters.
Great, thank you. And Richard, how important are open communities to personal AI that empowers individuals instead of the people that make them?
I think it's a huge difference maker. I come at it as a lawyer, so I think about governance. So, from the technology perspective, you design something to be a certain way, but then once it's sort of out in the world, it is now governed by the laws, the regulations, the rules, the best practices, the policies, all the things that an entity behind it puts in place to run it on our behalf. And if it's an open community that's both done the designing and the governance, you have, I think, the maximum ability for individuals to have their say, to have input into how that application or set of applications or operating system in this case is being operated. If not, then you're taking lots of opportunities off the table for people to have real autonomy and agency when it comes to utilizing those kinds of tools.
All right. So, okay. And Doc, I want to shift to the importance of narrative and story and how that ties into power and autonomy, and how AI affects storytelling specifically. And with tools like Sora that can like generate video or audio and deepfakes very quickly, do you think recent products like that, like, do you think products like that will empower individuals more, or the mass marketing moguls that already have?
What tool is that you're talking?
Like Sora and content creation tools, pretty much.
Yeah. Wow, you can bullshit in so many new ways now. I'm sure. An interesting thing. So Richard comes to things as a lawyer. I come at them basically as a journalist. And the very first job I had at a newspaper, the most common thing said by an assignment editor or a managing editor, these are now antique titles because the papers don't exist anymore for the most part, was, what's a story? Everything has to be a story. And stories are the fundamental format of human interest. We love stories. The problem with stories is that is what you leave out, because if the facts don't fit the story, you don't tell that story. Donald Trump is, let me put it this way. I don't want to go into him, but it's an important point about stories. All stories have three elements. I learned this like on day 2. You have a character, you have a protagonist, that is, you have a conflict or a problem, and you have movement toward a resolution. Those three things. If you don't have those things, you don't have a story. So you can algorithmize that any way you want. But Trump is brilliant because he's a great character. He's a terrific character. He's all character all the time. And he creates conflict on a constant basis. He's brilliant at it. You can automate that shit, frankly, if you want to. And you don't even need the truth in order to make it operate, right? So, and it's a brilliant system that he's got. And I'm amazed no journalists have looked at it and say, look, he's programmatic, it's working, right? So the problem with this, and this is one thing that I'm working on now, in the work I'm doing at Indiana University, is how do we accumulate the facts? Because if you're a decision maker, you need facts. If you're a lawyer, you need facts. If you're a programmer, if you're a business leader, if you're you have any important position, or even if you're an ordinary human being operating in your own house, you need a lot of facts. And to me, that's the thing that an AI really needs most to work with. And that's what we're kind of short on. Turning that into stories is like, that's great if you could do it. It's not that hard. But getting as many of the right facts available to you to make a decision that you need now or soon, or to make sense of your life, is really the big challenge.
Okay, thank you. And Pankaj, last question before we open up for questions from the audience. With your vast experience in venture capital, does empowerment lie purely on the tool itself, or will the VC financial system have to change to support that idea of individual empowerment?
We are in a unique context in that deploying AI is actually very expensive. And so the big tech has seen the winnings with NVIDIA and Google and so on, because we are building the infrastructure. For every dollar of silicon margin, traditionally we have had $20 of application benefit. And I think the application space in different verticals, healthcare and mining and construction and retail and so on and so forth, I think that's where the innovation will come from the startups. Today, the infrastructure innovation is primarily coming from the big guys. So from a VC space, investing in a silicon company like Grok or Cerebras, these guys have raised $1 billion. They're competing with NVIDIA and Qualcomm, who have tens of billions of dollars. It's very challenging. But VCs investing in the application layer or in the middleware layer like security, I think that's where we'll see 100x, 1000x returns. So as long as the VC community is looking at the stack and figuring out what is the right place to target their money, I think we'll be okay.
All right, thank you so much. And do we have any questions from the audience? Are you in line? No, you're just standing. That's cool. Go ahead, Bill.
GPT is a powerful technology invented in 2006 to help people Google translate a very nuanced language, English. So we take this process and we run it over the entire English internet or some part of it. And then we have this huge model of stuff. And prompt engineering is kind of like getting somewhere in this massive tree. So will GPT tell us, will AI tell us it'll destroy us? Of course it will, because somebody talked about that. It depends on how you train it. It's a statistical function. So it's going to change over time, depending on how people prompt it. So my big concern and my question to you guys, it cost $1 billion to build that first model by OpenAI. That's what I heard or read. How is anyone going to validate this large language model and know that it's not completely made up and lying and have other security issues? It's a statistical function. It doesn't think. It can't rationalize stuff. If two things are similar in a curve, it'll show up, and you get what looks like creativity, and people get excited about that. My big concern, is the thing I'm throwing out, is how do you validate that? So when a doctor or an executive is looking at GPT, or someone in personal investments looks at GPT, and it's hallucinating, what do you guys think?
Well, as a lawyer, I would say there's some massive liability concerns there. We're all familiar from the early days. Example of the attorney who wrote a brief for a case and relied on GPT at that time. I think it was 3. got some stuff wrong, never bothered to go back and look at the citations and figure it out. So I think, so just looking at it just strictly from like the point of liability, I've heard someone talk about LLMs a bit like it's almost like it's like the quantum world. Every time you look at it or touch it, you're affecting it and changing it. And the fact that we're in this now situation where we have something called prompt engineering, right? We're trying to figure out how to ask the right questions to get the right answers. Tells me we're a long way from having something that feels stable enough that we can rely on for really important, consequential decisions in society. Will we get there? Most likely. I mean, they're going to get better and better over time, but it's going to take a while. And again, in the meantime, I think the reliance aspect of it is going to be pretty fraught.
I think it's all relative. The first deployments of AI are in customer service, in marketing, etc. I would argue in marketing, hallucination is a feature, not a bug, to borrow your language, right? When I ask ChatGPT to write a poetry, it is hallucinating. I like that. So, or when I ask to create an image, it is hallucinating, right? You don't want ChatGPT or whatever to be doing that when you're talking about autonomous vehicle or healthcare and so on. So over time, we'll get better at it. The upside is so much bigger than the downside. Every time there is a legal mishap, it gets coverage. But all the positive ways people are using it in the legal field, you don't get coverage. But my simple point is, there is a reason healthcare is not mature today, and autonomous vehicles are not left, right, center. We are trying it in marketing, in customer support. We'll move to manufacturing and so on. We'll move to education. Then we'll move to where the cost of a mistake is death. And that's a way off. But like everything else, we'll get better over time. Hi.
I had a question. What is the importance, since we're at an open source conference, and what is the importance of open sourcing of AI tools and or I guess models, et cetera, for the ability to eliminate bias? For example, one of the benefits of open source from an information security context is the ability to go and find bugs in the code, right? There's a lot of talk these days in the AI world about hallucination, but there's also bias as well. Does open source, is that the best way to eliminate that?
Right. I can go first. So I think personally, I believe that open sourcing helps people get to experiment with the technology. I think first thing that happened is I think the technology with LLMs and GPT probably got out prematurely before evaluating all aspects of it. So I think second best that can happen is to open source, and that's what they did, right? So now everybody in the peer sector can review, look at it. So I think this kind of eliminates the bias that goes in there, because now you can choose what data you want to put into pre-train. Yes, granted, it takes millions, but still people can now take their curated data, which can contribute to that pre-trained model before it gets to fine-tune and all the other stages in its life cycle, right? The second piece is transparency, right? No, by nature, open source, now it's out there for anyone to look at it and review and look out what is in there. And this is not what we are getting from closed source, right? So there's always this missing piece, like what else is going on there? So I think it's very important from that aspect to work with open source aspect of things.
All right.
We are out of time. I'm going to have to call the time clock on this one. Thank you so much to the panelists. Really appreciate you all. We're going to try to abbreviate our break. We've got John Willis coming up next for the next conversation. Godfather of DevOps is in the house here. Take a quick break. Let's make it 5 minutes. It was scheduled for 10. Let's make it 5 minutes. And come on back in here if you need to use the restroom. Good time. We look forward to having you back in here for the second half. Thank you.